You know, Frag, it helps if you turn the mic on. Welcome back to Fraggoth Reads. I'm your intrepid reader, Fraggoth, and today we're going to be reading more of the Endymion Omnibus, which is part of the Hyperion Cantos, and we will specifically be reading the end of part 1 of the second book, fourth book, entitled The Rise of Endymion. That's a long way of saying today's going to be a little bit shorter than the last couple, but not by much. So a lot has gone down. Let's see. So we won't be hearing from Raul and Endymion anymore. He has been eaten by a Jovian Space Cuttlefish. So he's gone. The story will be ending presently once we get through this this last bit. Let's see. Our friend Father Captain Federico de Soya has mutinied/rebelled against the Pax because, let's face it, massacring, causing genocide isn't necessarily particularly Christian, at least from his perspective. Crusade be damned, literally. And, oh gosh, what else has gone on? Kenzo Isazaki had a quick little tete-a-tete with Counselor Albedo, which ends with him getting shock-collared. Isazaki, not Albedo. Thus revealing that the Technocore's ultimate use for the crucifixes and making sure that the crucifixes work to keep people immortal is to basically have a leash on all of humanity. Let's see. There's a bit more going on there. We'll get to that. Let's see. Oh, yes. And Cardinal Mustafa has been bumming around on Mars. He has got his ass to Mars. And he doesn't like it there very much. It's gritty, it's sandy, it's awful. It is not a pleasant place. Mostly because the terraforming is imploding. It's basically the Martian desert is reclaiming everything. What else? Oh, yeah. And when last we saw him, there was an Opus Dei vehicle, space vessel, just drifting somewhere out beyond Mars's orbit. More on that later, possibly. Anyway, let's get crack-a-lackin' and read through some more of The Rise of Endymion. I wanted to do this yesterday, but life conspired to prevent that. My apologies. All right, let's get going.
13. Kenzo Isozaki was not surprised when the Swiss Guard came for him. The Corps Helvetica colonel and 8 troopers in full orange and blue dress uniforms with energy lances and death wands arrived at the Taurus Mercantilis unannounced, demanded to see CEO Isozaki in his private office, and presented him with an encrypted disk key ordering him to dress formally and appear before His Holiness Pope Urban XVI. Immediately. The colonel stayed in sight of Isozaki as the CEO stepped into his personal apartment, quickly showered, and dressed in his most formal white shirt, gray vest, red cravat, the double-breasted black demi-suit with the gold buttons on the side, and black velvet cape.
"May I phone my associates and issue business instructions in case I should miss meetings scheduled for later today?"
he asked the colonel as they stepped out of the lift into the main reception hall where the troopers made a sort of gold and blue corridor between the workstations.
"No,"
said the Swiss Guard officer. A Pax Fleet ram scout was docked where Isozaki's personal ship was usually berthed. The Pax crew gave the mercantilist CEO the briefest of nods, instructed him to strap into his acceleration couch, and then they were boosting in system with 2 torch ships visible on the tactical holo display as they dropped into escort position.
"They are treating me as a prisoner, not an honored guest,"
thought Isozaki. His face revealed nothing, of course, but a wave of something like relief followed the pulse of fear and dread in him. He had been expecting this since his illicit meeting with the Councillor Albedo. He had slept almost not at all since that painful and traumatic rendezvous. Isozaki knew that there was no reason for Albedo not to reveal the fact of the mercantilist's attempts to contact the Technocorps, but he hoped that they would believe that it was his attempt and his alone. Silently, Isozaki gave thanks to whatever gods that wanted to listen that his friend and associate, Anna Pelliconiani, was out of Pacem system, visiting Renaissance Vector for a major trade fair there. From his couch between the Swiss Guard colonel and one of the troopers, Isozaki could see the tactical holo in front of the pilot's position. The sphere of moving light and color with its solid bars of code was highly technical, but Isozaki had been a pilot before these boys were born. He could see that they were not accelerating toward the world of Pacem, but toward a destination near the trailing Trojan point, directly in the middle of the swarm of Pax Fleet asteroid bases and system defense forts.
"A Holy Office orbital prison,"
thought Isozaki. Worse than Castel Sant'Angelo, where the virtual pain machines were said to run all hours of the day and night. In one of the orbital dungeons, no one could hear you scream.
In the orbital dungeons, no one can hear you scream."
He was sure that the command to attend a papal audience was mere irony, a way to get him out of the Pax Mercantilis without protest. Isozaki would have bet anything that within days, perhaps hours, his formal suit and cape would be bloody, sweat-soaked rags.
The reason in one of the orbital dungeons, no one could hear you scream
is funny is because of, that was the tagline for the movie Alien.
"In space, no one can hear you scream."
He was wrong on all counts. The ram scout decelerated above the plane of the ecliptic, and he realized their destination. Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer retreat. The disk-key viewer in the CEO's couch worked, and he called up an exterior view as the ram scout left its escorting torch ships and dropped toward the massive potato-shaped asteroid. More than 40 clicks long and 25 across, Castel Gandolfo was a little world of its own, its sky blue, its oxygen-rich atmosphere held in by Class 20 containment fields, wrapped with infinite redundancies, the hillsides and terraces green with grass and crops, the sculpted mountains forested and running with streams and small animals. Isozaki saw this ancient Italian village pass below and knew that the peaceful vision was deceptive. Surrounding Pax bases could destroy any ship or fleet in existence, while the interior of asteroid Castel Gandolfo was honeycombed with garrisons, holding more than 10,000 Swiss Guard and elite Pax troopers. The ram scout morphed wings and flew the final 10 kilometers on silent electric pulse jets. Isozaki saw the Swiss Guard troopers in full battle dress rise to escort the ship the final 5 clicks. Rich sunlight glinted off their dynamic flow armor and transparent face shields as they encircled the ram scout and approached the castle at dead slow speeds. Isozaki saw several of the troopers aim probes at the ship, confirming with deep radar and infrared what the encrypted manifest readouts had told them about the number and identity of passengers and crew. A door opened in the side of one of the castle's stone towers, and the ram scout floated in, pulse jets cool, the Swiss Guard troopers tugging the aircraft into place with the blue glow of their lift packs. The airlock cycled. The 8 Swiss Guard troopers went down the ramp first, taking up their 2 lines as the colonel escorted Kenzo Isozaki out and down. The CEO was looking for a lift door or stairway, but the entire berthing level of the tower began to descend. The motors and gears were silent. Only the passing stone walls of the tower told of their movement downward and then sideways into the subterranean guts of Castel Gandolfo. They stopped. A door appeared in the wall of cold stone. Lights illuminated a corridor of polished steel with floating fiberplastic lens pods keeping watch at 10-meter intervals. The colonel gestured, and Isozaki led the procession down the echoing tunnel. At the end, blue light washed over them all. As other probes and sensors searched them inside and out. A chime rang, and another portal appeared and irised open. This was a more formal waiting room. 3 people stood when Isozaki and his escort entered. Damn, thought the Pax Mercantilis CEO. Anna Pelliconiani was there, dressed in her finest Fresilk sobes. F-R-E silk robes. Anna Pelliconiani was there, dressed in her finest Fresilk robes, as were CEOs Helvig Aron and Kenneth Hay Modino, Isozaki's other counterparts on the Executive Council of the Pan-Capitalist League of Independent Catholic Transstellar Trade Organizations. Damn, thought Kenzo Isozaki again, his face staying absolutely impassive while he nodded silently to his associates. They are going to hold all of us accountable for my actions. We will all be excommunicated and executed.
This way,
said the Swiss Guard colonel, and opened an elaborately carved door. The room beyond was darker. Isozaki smelled candles, incense, and sweating stone. He realized that the Swiss Guardsmen were not going to... Okay. He realized that the Swiss Guardsmen were not going with them through that door. Whatever waited there waited for his party alone.
Thank you, Colonel,
said CEO Isozaki in a pleasant voice. With firm strides, he led the way into the incense-filled darkness. It was a small chapel, dark except for red votive candles flickering in a wrought iron stand against one stone wall and 2 arched stained glass windows behind the simple altar at the far end. 6 more candles burned on the bare altar, while flames in braziers on the far side of the windows cast more ruddy light into the long, narrow room. There was only one chair, tall, straight-backed, velvet-cushioned, and placed to the left of the altar. In the back of the chair was embossed what at first appeared to be a cruciform, but what, upon second glance, was revealed to be the triple cross of the Pope. The altar and chair were set upon a low stone dais. The rest of the chapel was without chairs or pews, but red velvet cushions had been set on the dark stone on either side of the aisle down which Ms. Isozaki, Coniani, Hay Modino, and Aron walked. There were 4 cushions, 2 on either side of the aisle, that were not in use. The mercantilist CEOs dipped fingers in the stone font holding holy water, crossed themselves, genuflected toward the altar, and went to their knees on the cushions. Before lowering his head in prayer, Kenzo Isozaki glanced around the tiny chapel. Nearest the altar dais knelt Vatican Secretary of State Simone Augustino Cardinal Lordusime, a mountain of red and black in the ruddy light, his jowls and chins hiding his clerical collar as he bowed his head in prayer. And behind him knelt the scarecrow figure of his aide, Monsignor Lucas Oddi. Across the aisle from Lordusime, the Holy Office's Grand Inquisitor, John Domenico Cardinal Mustafa, knelt in prayer, his eyes closed. Next to him was the infamous intelligence agent and torturer, Father Farrell. On Lordusime's side of the aisle, 3 Pax Fleet officers were on their knees. Admiral Marusin, his silver hair glinting in the red light, and his aide, Admiral Margaret Wu, and someone whose face it took Isozaki a moment to recall, Admiral Aldecacti. On the Grand Inquisitor's side of the aisle knelt Cardinal Dunoyer, prefect and president of Cor Unum. Dunoyer was a woman in her healthy 70s, standard, with a strong jaw and short-cropped gray hair. Her eyes were the color of flint. Isozaki did not recognize the middle-aged man in monsignorial robes who knelt behind the cardinal. The final 4 kneeling figures were the mercantilist CEOs, Aaron and Hei Modino on the Grand Inquisitor's side of the aisle, Isozaki and Peli Cognani on the Secretary of State's side. Isozaki counted a total of 13 people in the chapel. Not an auspicious number, he thought. At that moment, a hidden door in the wall to the right of the altar opened silently, and the Pope entered with 4 men in attendance. The 13 people in the chapel rose quickly from their knees and stood with their heads bowed. Kenzo Isozaki had time to recognize 2 of the men with the Pope as aides and the 3rd as head of papal security, faceless functionaries. But the 4th man, the man in gray, was Councillor Albedo. Only Albedo stayed with the Pope as His Holiness walked into the room, allowing the kissing of his ring and touching the heads of the gathered men and women as they knelt again. Finally, His Holiness, Pope Urban XVI, took his seat in the straight-backed throne with Albedo standing behind him. The 13 dignitaries in the room immediately stood. Isozaki lowered his eyes, his face remaining a study in calm, but his heart pounded at his ribs.
Will Albedo expose us all? Have all these groups attempted secret contact with the Corps? Are we to be confronted by His Holiness and then taken from here, our cruciforms removed, and then executed?
Isozaki thought it likely. "Brothers and sisters in Christ," began His Holiness, "we are pleased that you have agreed to join us here this day. What we must say in this sacred and silent place has remained a secret for centuries, and must remain within this circle until formal permission to share it with others is granted from the Holy See. We so adjure and command you, upon the pain of excommunication and the loss of your souls to the light of Christ." The 13 men and women murmured prayers and acquiescence. "In the recent months and years," continued His Holiness, "there have occurred events both strange and terrible. We have witnessed these from afar. Some of these we have foreseen with the help of our Lord Jesus Christ, and many we have prayed would pass from us, sparing our people, our Pax, and our Church from a test of wills, faith, and fortitude. But events occur as the Lord wills them to occur. It is not possible for even His most faithful servant to understand all events and portents, only to trust in His mercy when those events seem most threatening and perplexing." The 13 dignitaries kept their eyes carefully downcast. "Rather than relate these events from our perspective," His Holiness said softly, "we shall ask some of those who participated in them to report in full. Then we shall endeavor to explain the connections between such seemingly disparate occurrences. Admiral Marusin?" The silver-haired admiral shifted slightly to face the others as well as His Holiness. He cleared his throat.
"Reports from a world called Vitus Grey Balianus B suggest that we came close to capturing the Hyperion-born man named Raul Endymion, who eluded us with our primary subject, the girl named Ania, almost 5 standard years ago. Elements of a special force of the Noble Guard..."
The Admiral nodded toward Pope Urban XVI, who lowered his gaze in agreement.
Elements of this special force, continued Marrowson, tipped our commander on Vitus Grey Balianus B to the possible presence of this person. Although he escaped before our search of the area was completed, we did turn up definite DNA and micron tag evidence that this was the same Raul Endymion who had been briefly incarcerated on the world of Mare Infinitus more than 4 years ago.
Cardinal Lordusamy cleared his throat.
It might be helpful, Admiral, if you described how the suspect, Raul Endymion, escaped from this world of Vitus Grey Balianus B.
Kenzo Isozaki did not blink, but he registered the fact that Lordusamy was speaking for His Holiness in this conference.
Thank you, Your Excellency, said Admiral Marrowson. Yes, it appears that this Endymion both appeared on and escaped the planet via one of the ancient Farcasters.
There was no audible buzz in the room, but Isozaki sensed the psychic hum of interest and shock. There had been rumors for the past 4 years centering on Pax Fleet forces chasing some heretic who had managed to activate the dormant Farcasters.
And was this Farcaster active when your men inspected it?
Questioned Lordusamy.
Negative, Your Excellency, said Admiral Marrowson. There was no sign of activity on either Farcaster, the one upriver which must have granted the fugitive access to Vitus Grey Balianus B, nor the one downriver from the settlements.
But you are certain that this Endymion had not arrived on planet by some more conventional means, and equally certain that he is not hiding there now?
Yes, Your Excellency. This Pax world has excellent traffic control and orbital defenses. Any spacecraft approaching Vitus Grey Balianus B would have been detected light hours from the planet, and we have turned the world upside down searching, administered truth tell to tens of thousands of the inhabitants. The man named Endymion is not there. Witnesses did describe, however, a flash of light at the downstream Farcaster at the precise moment that our sensors in and above that hemisphere registered a major energy surge consistent with old records of Farcaster displacement fields.
His Holiness raised his face and made a subtle gesture to Cardinal Lordusamy.
And I believe you have one other bit of unsettling news, Admiral Marrowson,
rumbled Lordusamy. The Admiral's countenance grew grimmer as he nodded.
Aye, Your Excellency, Your Holiness. This involves the first mutiny in the history of Pax Fleet.
Isozaki again sensed the unspoken murmur of shock. He showed no emotion or reaction, but out of the corner of his eye he saw Anna Pelliconiani glancing at him.
I will have Admiral Aldecacti brief us on this matter, said Marrowson.
He stepped back and folded his hands in front of him. Isozaki noted that Aldecacti was one of those stocky Lucian women who seemed almost too androgynous to label with gender. She was as solid and blocky as a brick in a dress uniform. Aldecacti did not waste time clearing her throat. She launched into an immediate briefing involving Task Force GIDEON, its mission to attack ouster strongholds in 7 systems far in the outback, the successful outcome of that mission in all 7 systems, and then the surprise in the final system, code-named Lucifer.
To this point, the task force had performed beyond expectations and simulations, barked Admiral Aldecacti. As a result, while completing operations in ouster system Lucifer, I authorized a Gideon Drive drone to carry a message to Bachem, to His Holiness and Admiral Marrowson, requesting permission to refuel and refit in Tau Ceti system, and then extend Task Force Gideon's mission, attacking new ouster systems before the alarm of our attack spread through the outback. I received Gideon drone permission to do this, and proceeded to take the bulk of my task force to Tau Ceti system for refueling, rearming, and rendezvous with 5 additional Archangel starships which had come online since our task force had left Pax space.
You took the bulk of your task force?
Queried Cardinal Lordusamy in his soft rumble.
Yes, Your Excellency.
There was no apology or quavering in Aldecacti's flat Lucian voice.
5 ouster torch ships had escaped our detection and were accelerating toward a Hawking Drive translation point, which would have presumably brought them out in another ouster system. They would have spread the alarm of our task force's presence and lethality. Rather than divert the entire Task Force GIDEON, which was approaching our own translation point to Tau City system, I authorized HHS Gabriel and HHS Raphael to remain in Lucifer system just long enough to intercept and destroy the ouster torch ships.
Lord Usami folded his pudgy hands in his robe. His voice was a deep purr.
And then you translated your flagship, the Uriel, and 4 other archangels to Tau Ceti system.
Yes, Your Excellency.
Leaving the Gabriel and the Raphael in Lucifer system.
Yes, Your Excellency.
And were you aware, Admiral, that the Raphael was commanded by Father Captain de Soya, the same captain who had been reprimanded some years earlier for not succeeding in his mission of finding and detaining the child, Ania?
Yes, Your Excellency.
And you were aware, Admiral, that Pax Fleet and the Holy See were concerned enough about Father Captain de Soya's, stability, that the Holy Office had assigned an undercover agent aboard the Raphael to observe and transmit observations on Father Captain de Soya's behavior and reliability?
A spy, said Admiral Aldecacti. Commander Liebler. Yes, Your Excellency. I was aware that the Holy Office agents aboard my flagship were receiving encoded tight beam broadcasts from Commander Liebler aboard the Raphael.
And did these agents share any concerns or data from these broadcasts, Admiral Aldecacti?
Negative, Your Excellency. I was not made aware of the nature of the Holy Office's concerns related to Father Captain de Soya's loyalty or sanity.
Cardinal Mustafa cleared his throat and raised one finger. Lord Usami, who had been in charge of what Isozaki and the others had quickly recognized as an inquisition, glanced at the Pope. His Holiness nodded in the direction of the Grand Inquisitor. I feel it necessary to point out to His Holiness and the other worthies in this room that observation of Father Captain de Soya had been approved, directed, from the Office of the Holy See, with verbal authorization from the Secretary of State and Pax Fleet Command, specifically from Admiral Marusin. There was a brief silence. Finally, Lord Usami said,
And can you tell us, Cardinal Mustafa, what the source of this shared concern had been?
Mustafa licked his lips. Yes, Your Excellency. Our, intelligence reports indicated that there might have been some chance of contamination during Father Captain de Soya's chase and rare contact with the subject named Ania.
Contamination?
Queried Lord Usami. Yes, Your Excellency. It was our assessment that the girl named Ania had the power to affect both the physical and psychological makeup of those Pax citizens with whom she came in contact. Our concern in this instance was for the absolute loyalty and obedience of one of the Pax Fleet's starship commanders.
And how was this intelligence assessment made, Cardinal Mustafa?
Continued Lord Usami. The Grand Inquisitor paused. A variety of intelligence sources and methods were used, Your Excellency. Lord Usami did not pause.
Among these were the fact that you have detained and, interrogated one of Father Captain de Soya's fellow shipmen from the aforementioned abortive chase of subject Nia. Is that not correct, Cardinal Mustafa? Corporal Key, I believe.
Mustafa blinked. That is correct, Your Excellency. The Grand Inquisitor turned slightly so as to speak to the others in the room as well as the Pope and the Secretary of State. Such detention is unusual, but called for in a situation which appears to affect the security of the Church and the Pax.
Of course, Your Excellency, murmured Cardinal Lord Usami. Admiral Aldecacti, you may continue with the briefing.
Some hours after my 5 archangels jumped to Tau City system, said Algidacacti, and before any of us had completed our 2-day resurrection cycle, a Gideon drone translated into Tau City space. It had been launched by Mother Captain Stone.
Captain of the HHS Gabriel, said Lord Dusamy.
Affirmative, Your Excellency. The drone's encrypted message, encrypted in a code for my eyes only, said that the ouster torch ships had been destroyed, but that the Raphael had gone rogue, was accelerating toward an unauthorized translation point, and would not respond to Mother Captain Stone's orders to stop.
In other words, purred Lord Dusamy, one of His Holiness's Pax Fleet ships had suffered a mutiny.
It appeared so, Your Excellency, although in this case the mutiny seemed to have been led by the ship's captain.
Father Captain de Soya.
Yes, Your Excellency.
And were there attempts made to contact the Holy Office agent aboard the Raphael?
Yes, Your Excellency. Father Captain de Soya said that Commander Liebler was attending to duties. Mother Captain Stone thought this unlikely.
And when challenged about the changed translation point, queried Lord Dusamy,
Father Captain de Soya answered that I had tight-beamed changed orders to the Raphael prior to our task force's translation, said Admiral Aldecacti.
Did Mother Stone accept this explanation?
Negative, Your Excellency. Mother Captain Stone closed the distance between the 2 archangels and engaged the Raphael.
What was the outcome of that engagement, Admiral?
Aldecacti hesitated only a heartbeat. Your Excellency, Your Holiness, because Mother Captain Stone had used an eyes-only encryption for her drone message, it was a full day in Tau Ceti system, the time it took for my emergency resurrection, before I read the message and authorized an immediate return to Lucifer system.
How many ships did you take with you, Admiral?
3, Your Excellency. My own flagship, the Uriel, with a fresh crew, and 2 of the Archangels that had rendezvoused with us in Tau Ceti system, the Mikal and the Israel. I felt that the risk of accelerating resurrection of the Task Force GIDEON crews was too great.
Although you accepted that risk yourself, Admiral, said Lord Dusamy.
Aldecacti said nothing.
What happened then, Admiral?
We jumped immediately to Lucifer system, Your Excellency. There we recycled under 12-hour automated resurrection. Many of the resurrections were unsuccessful. By combining the successfully resurrected crew members from all 3 ships, I was able to crew the Uriel. I left the other 2 starships in passive but automated defensive trajectories while I commenced searching for the Gabriel and the Raphael. I found neither. But a final beacon drone was soon discovered on the far side of Lucifer's yellow sun.
And the beacon was from? Prompted Lord Dusamy.
Mother Captain Stone. The beacon held the downloaded history of the Gabriel's combat recorder. It showed the battle that had taken place less than 2 days before. Stone had attempted to destroy the Raphael by plasma and fusion weapons. The attempts failed. The Gabriel then engaged Father Captain de Soya's ship by death beam.
There was silence in the tiny chapel. Isozaki watched the red light of the flickering votive candles painting the pained face of His Holiness, Pope Urban XVI. Both the outcome of that engagement, said Lord Dusamy.
Both crews died, said Aldecacti. According to automated instruments aboard the Gabriel, the Raphael completed automated translation. Mother Captain Stone had ordered her crew to resurrection crash battle stations. She had programmed the Gabriel's ship computers to resurrect her and several of the essential crew members on an emergency 8-hour cycle. Only she and one of her officers survived the resurrection. Mother Captain Stone encoded the beacon and accelerated to the Raphael's former translation point. She was determined to seek out and destroy the ship, preferably before de Soya and his crew completed resurrection, if they were in their creches at the time of the death beaming.
Did Mother Captain Stone know which system this translation point would open upon, Admiral?
Negative, Your Excellency. There were too many variables involved.
And what was your response to the beacon's data, Admiral?
I waited 12 hours for a working complement of the crews on the Mikal and Israel to complete resurrection, Your Excellency. I then translated all 3 of my ships through the jump point indicated by the Raphael and Gabriel. I left a second beacon for the Archangels I was sure would be following from Tau Ceti system within hours.
You did not find it necessary to wait for those ships?
No, Your Excellency. I thought it important to translate as soon as all 3 of my ships were combat ready.
But you did find it expedient to wait for the crews of these 2 ships, Admiral. Why did you not give chase immediately with only the Uriel?
Aldecalde did not hesitate. It was a command combat decision, Your Excellency. I felt that the probabilities were very high that Father Captain de Soya had taken the Raphael to an ouster system, quite possibly one more heavily armed than any Task Force GIDEON had encountered. I also felt it probable that Mother Captain Stone's ship, the Gabriel, had been destroyed by either the Raphael or ouster ships within the unknown system. I felt that 3 ships of the line were the minimum force I could take into this unknown situation.
And was it an ouster system, Admiral?
Negative, Your Excellency, or at least no sign of ousters was discovered in the 2 weeks of investigation following this incident.
Where did the translation point take you, Admiral?
Into the outer shell of a red giant star, said Admiral Aldecalde. Our containment fields were, of course, activated, but it was a very close thing.
Did all 3 of your ships make it, Admiral?
Negative, Your Excellency. The Uriel and Israel survived exit from the star and containment field cooling procedures. The Mikal was lost with all hands.
And did you find the Gabriel and the Raphael, Admiral?
Only the Gabriel, Your Excellency. It was discovered floating free some 2 AUs from the Red Giant. All systems were inoperative. There had been a breach of the containment field, and the interior of the ship had melted into a single molten mass.
Were Mother Captain Stone and the other crew members found and resurrected, Admiral?
Unfortunately, no, Your Excellency. There was not enough discrete organic material remaining to pursue resurrection.
Was the slagging due to emergence in the Red Giant or attack from the Raphael or ouster unknowns, Admiral?
It is still being determined by our materials experts, Your Excellency, but the preliminary report suggests an overload due to both natural and combat causes. The weapons used would have been consistent with the Raphael's armament.
So are you saying that the Gabriel fought an automated engagement near this Red Giant's sun, Admiral?
Within the star, Your Excellency. It seems the Raphael turned about, re-entered the star, and attacked the Gabriel within seconds of its emergence from Hawking space.
And is there a chance that the Raphael was also destroyed in this second engagement? The ship incinerated deep in the star?
A chance, Your Excellency, but we are not operating upon that assumption. It is our best guess that Father Captain de Soya then translated out of system to an unknown destination in the outback.
Lord Usami nodded, his heavy jowls quivering slightly.
Admiral Marusin, he rumbled, could you give us an assessment of this threat if the Raphael did indeed survive?
The older admiral stepped forward.
Your Excellency, we have to assume that Father Captain de Soya and the other mutineers are hostile to the Pax, and that this theft of a Pax Archangel-class starship was premeditated. We also have to assume the worst-case scenario, that this theft of our most secret and lethal weapon system was carried out in coordination with the ousters.
The admiral took a breath.
Your Excellencies, Your Holiness, with the Gideon Drive, any point in this arm in the galaxy is only an instant away from any other. The Raphael could translate into any Pax system, even Pachem's, without the Hawking Drive wake warnings of the earlier and current ouster spacecraft. The Raphael could ravage our page-flipping mercantilist... The Raphael could ravage our mercantilist transport lanes, attack undefended worlds and colonies, and generally wreak havoc before a Pax task force could respond.
The Pope raised one finger.
Admiral Marusin, are we to understand that this most prized of Gideon Drive technologies may fall into the hands of the ousters, be duplicated, and thus power many of the enemy's ships?
Marosin's already florid face and neck flushed more deeply.
Your Holiness, that is unlikely, Your Holiness. Extremely unlikely. The steps of manufacture of a Gideon Archangel are so complex, the cost so prohibitive, the secret elements so guarded. But it is possible, interrupted the Pope. Yes, Your Holiness.
The Pope raised his hand like a blade cutting through the air. We believe that we have heard all we need to hear from our friends in Pax Fleet. You are excused, Admiral Marosin, Admiral Aldecalde, Admiral Wu. The three officers genuflected, bowed their heads, stood, and backed away from His Holiness. The door whispered shut behind them. There were now 10 dignitaries present, in addition to the silent papal aides and Councillor Albedo. The Pope inclined his head towards Secretary of State Cardinal Lordusamy. Disposition, Simone Augustino?
Admiral Marosin is to receive a letter of rebuke and will be transferred to General Staff, said Lordusamy softly. Admiral Wu will take his place as temporary Pax Fleet Commander-in-Chief until a suitable replacement is found. Admiral Aldecalde has been recommended for excommunication and execution by firing squad.
The Pope nodded sadly. We shall now hear from Cardinal Mustafa, Cardinal Dunoye, CEO Isozaki, and Councillor Albedo before concluding this business. Oi, indeed, Frank Misers. And thus ended the official inquiry by the Holy Office pertaining to the events of the Pax world of Mars, concluded Cardinal Mustafa. He glanced at Cardinal Lordusamy. It was at this time that Captain Womack suggested that it was imperative that my entourage and I return to the Archangel Jibril, still in orbit around that planet.
Please continue, Excellency, murmured Cardinal Lordusamy. Can you tell us the nature of the emergency which Captain Womack felt required your imperative return?
Yes, said Mustafa, rubbing his lower lip. Captain Womack had found the interstellar freighter that had unloaded cargo from the unlisted base near the Martian city of Arafat Kafir. The ship had been discovered floating powerless in Old Earth System's asteroid belt.
Can you tell us the name of that ship, Excellency?
Prompted Lordusamy. The HHMS Saigon Maru. The CEO Kenzo Isozaki's lips twitched despite his iron control. He remembered the ship. His oldest son had crewed on it during the early years of the boy's apprenticeship. The Saigon Maru had been an ancient ore and bulk freighter, about a 3-million-ton ion sledge carrier, as he recalled.
CEO Isozaki,
snapped Lordusamy.
Yes, Your Excellency.
Isozaki's voice was smooth and emotionless.
The ship's designation suggests that it is of mercantilist registry. Is this correct, Emma Isozaki?
Yes, Your Excellency, said the CEO, but it is my recollection that the HHMS Saigon Maru was sold for scrap along with 60-some other obsolete freighters about 8 standard years ago, if memory serves.
Your Excellencies, said Anna Pelliconiani, Your Holiness, if I might. The other CEO had whispered to her wafer-thin comlog and now touched her hearing. Her hear-ring. It's a earpiece. That's an earring. It's a hearing. It's a fun word joke. It doesn't translate super well when spoken aloud, I regret to say.
CEO Pelliconiani,
said Cardinal Lordusamy.
Our records show that the Saigon Maru was indeed sold to independent scrap contractors some 8 years, 3 months, and 2 days ago, standard. Later transmissions confirmed that the ships had been scrapped and recycled at Armagast Orbital Automated Foundries.
Thank you, CEO Pelliconiani, said Lordusamy. Cardinal Mustafa, you may continue.
The Grand Inquisitor nodded and continued his briefing, covering only the most necessary details. And while he spoke, he thought of the images he was not describing in detail. The Jibril and its accompanying torch ship slowing to silent, synchronized tumbling. Oh gosh, I know how that comma works, but my brain didn't. The Jibril and his accompanying torch ship slowing to silent, synchronized tumbling, matching velocities with the dark freighter. Cardinal Mustafa had always imagined asteroid belts as tightly packed clusters of moonlets, but despite the multiple images on the tactical plot, there were no rocks in sight, just the matte black freighter, as ugly and functional as a rusted mass of pipes and cylinders, half a click long. Matched as they were in velocity and trajectory, hanging only 3 clicks away with the yellow sun of humankind's birth burning beyond their sterns, Jibril and the Saigon Maru appeared motionless, with only the stars wheeling slowly around them. Mustafa remembered, and regretted, his decision to inspect the ship with the troopers who were going aboard. The indignities of suiting up in Swiss Guard combat armor, a monomole D skinsuit layer, followed by an AI neural mesh, then the spacesuit itself, bulkier than civilian skinsuits with its polymered sheath of impact armor, and finally the web belts of gear and the morphable reaction pack. The Jibril had deep radared the Hulk a dozen times and was certain that nothing moved or breathed on board, but the Archangel still backed off to 30 clicks attack distance as soon as the Grand Inquisitor, Security Commander Browning, Marine Sergeant Nell Kasner, former Ground Force Commander Major Piet, and 10 Swiss Guard/Marine commandos had jumped from the sallyport. Mustafa remembered his pounding pulse as they jetted closer to the dead freighter, 2 commandos ferrying him across the abyss as if he were another parcel to carry. He remembered the sunlight glinting off gold blast visors as the troopers communicated with tight beam squirts and hand signals, taking up positions on either side of the open airlock. 2 troopers went in first, their reaction packs throbbing. Give me a sec.
Garbage. Just garbage.
Where were we? 2 troopers went in first, their reaction packs throbbing silently, assault weapons raised. Then Commander Browning and Sergeant Kasner went in fast behind them. A minute later, there was a coded squirt on the tactical channel, and Mustafa's handlers guided him into the waiting black hole of the airlock. Corpses floating in the beams of flashlight lasers. Meat locker images. Frozen carcasses, red striped ribs, gutted abdominal cavities. Jaws locked open in eternally silent screams. Frozen streamers of blood from the gaping jaws and hemorrhaged, protruding eyes. Viscera drifting in tumbling trajectories amid the stabbing beams of light. "Crew," tight-beamed Commander Browning. "Shrike?" queried Cardinal Mustafa. He was mentally saying the rosary in rapid monotone, not for spiritual reassurance, but to keep his mind away from the images floating in hellish light before him. He had been warned not to vomit in his helmet. Filters and scrubbers would clean the mess before he strangled on it, but they were not foolproof. "Probably the Shrike. Probably the Shrike," answered Major Piet, extending his gauntlet into the shattered chest cavity of one of the drifting corpses. "See how the cruciform has been ripped out, just as in Arafat Kafia." "Commander," came a tight-beamed voice of one of the troopers who had moved aft from the airlock. "Sergeant, here, in the first cargo hold!" Browning and Piet had gone ahead of the Grand Inquisitor into the long cylindrical space. Flashlight lasers were lost in this huge space. These corpses had not been slashed and shattered. They were stacked neatly on carbon slabs extruding from the hull on each side, held in place by nylon mesh bands. The slabs came out from all sides of the hull, leaving only a zero-G corridor down the center. Mustafa and his guides and keepers floated the length of this black space, flashlight lasers stabbing left, right, down, and up. Frozen flesh, pale flesh, barcodes on the soles of their feet, pubic hair, closed eyes, hands pale against the black carbon by hip bones, flaccid penises, breasts frozen in zero-G weightlessness, hair tight on pale skulls or floating in frozen nimbuses. Children with smooth, cold skin, extended bellies, and translucent eyelids. Infants with bar-coded souls. There were tens of thousands of bodies in the 4 long cargo holds. All were human. All were naked. All were lifeless.
And did you complete your inspection of the HHMS Saigon Maru, Grand Inquisitor?
Prompted Cardinal Lordusamy. Mustafa realized that he had fallen silent for a long moment, possessed by the demon of that terrible memory.
"We did complete it, Your Excellency," he answered, his voice thick.
And your conclusions?
There were 67,827 human beings aboard the bulk freighter HHMS Saigon Maru, said the Grand Inquisitor. 51 of them were crew members. All of the crew members' bodies were accounted for. All had been slashed and rent in the same fashion as the victims at Arafat Kafir.
There were no survivors. None could be resurrected.
None.
In your opinion, Cardinal Mustafa, was the demon creature called the Shrike responsible for the death of the crew members of the HHMS Saigon Maru?
In my opinion, it was, Your Excellency.
And in your opinion, Cardinal Mustafa, was the Shrike responsible for the deaths of the 67,776 other bodies discovered on the Saigon Maru?
Mustafa hesitated only a second.
In my opinion, Your Excellency.
He turned his head and bowed in the direction of the man in the chair.
Your Holiness, the cause of death of the 67,000-some men, women, and children found on the HHMS Saigon Maru was not consistent with the wounds discovered on Mars's victims, or consistent with prior tales of Shrike attack.
Cardinal Lordusamy took a rustling step forward.
And, according to your Holy Office forensic experts, Cardinal Mustafa, what was the cause of death for the human beings found aboard this freighter?
Cardinal Mustafa's eyes were lowered as he spoke.
Your Excellency, neither the Holy Office nor Pax Fleet forensic specialists could specify any cause of death for these people. In fact...
Mustafa stopped.
In fact, Lordusamy continued for him, the bodies found aboard the Saigon Maru, exclusive of the crew, showed neither clear cause of death nor the attributes of death. Is that not correct?
That is correct, Your Excellency.
Mustafa's eyes roamed to the faces of the other dignitaries in the chapel.
They were not living, but they showed no signs of decomposition, post-mortem lividity, brain decay, none of the usual signs of physical death.
Yet they were not alive,
prompted Lordusamy.
Cardinal Mustafa rubbed his cheek. Not within our capacity to revive, Your Excellency, nor within our ability to detect signs of brain or cellular activity. They were stopped.
And what was the disposition of the bulk freighter, HHMS Saigon Maru, Cardinal Mustafa?
Captain Womack put a prize crew aboard from the Jibril. I'm going to try that sentence again. Captain Womack put a prize crew aboard from the Jibril, said the Grand Inquisitor. We returned immediately to Pachem to report the matter. The Saigon Maru was traveling via a traditional Hawking Drive, escorted by 4 Hawking Drive torch ships, and is scheduled to arrive in the nearest Pax system with a Pax Fleet base, Barnard system, I believe, in 3 standard weeks.
Lordusamy nodded slowly.
Thank you, Grand Inquisitor.
The Secretary of State walked to a place near the Pope's chair, genuflected toward the altar, and crossed himself as he crossed the aisle.
Your Holiness, I would ask that we hear from Her Excellency, Cardinal Dunoyer.
Pope Urban raised one hand as if in benediction.
We would be pleased to listen to Cardinal Dunoyer.
Kenzo Isozaki's mind was reeling. Why were they being told these things? What possible purpose could it serve for the CEOs of the Pax Mercantilis to hear these things? Isozaki's blood had chilled at the summary death sentence of Admiral Aldecalde. Was that to be the fate of all of them? No, he realized. Aldecalde had received a sentence of excommunication and execution for simple incompetence. If Mustafa, Pelliconiani, himself, and the others were to be charged with some variety of treason, quick, simple execution would be the furthest thing from their fates. The pain machines in Castel Sant'Angelo would be humming and grating for centuries. Cardinal Dunoyer obviously had chosen to be resurrected as an old woman. As with most older people, she looked in perfect health, all of her teeth, wrinkles at a minimum, dark eyes clear and bright. But she also preferred to be seen with her white hair, cut almost to the scalp, and skin tight across her sharp cheekbones. She began without preliminaries.
Your Holiness, Excellencies, other worthies, I appear here today as Prefect and President of Cor Unum and de facto spokesperson for the private agency known as Opus Dei. For reasons which shall become apparent, the administrators of Opus Dei could not and should not be present here this day.
Continue, Your Excellency,
said Cardinal Lordusamy.
The bulk freighter, the HHMS Saigon Maru, was purchased by Cor Unum for Opus Dei, diverted from scrap recycling, and delivered to that agency 7 years ago.
For what purpose, Your Excellency?
Queried Lordusamy. Cardinal Dunoyer's gaze moved from face to face in the small chapel, ending at His Holiness and looking down in respect.
For the purpose of transporting the lifeless bodies of millions of people such as were found on this interrupted voyage, Excellencies, Your Holiness.
The four mercantilist CEOs made a noise somewhere short of a gasp, but louder than a mere intake of breath.
Lifeless bodies,
repeated Cardinal Lordusamy, but with the calm tone of a prosecuting attorney who knows in advance what the answers to all questions will be.
Lifeless bodies from where, Cardinal Dunoyer?
From whatever world Opus Dei designates, Your Excellency, said Dunoyer. In the past 5 years, these worlds have included Hebron, Comriad, Fuji, Nevermore, Sol Draconi Septum, Parvati, Tsingtao, Suishuang Pana, New Mecca, Mao 4, Ixion, the Lambert Ring Territories, Sibiatu's Bitterness, Mare Infinitus North Littoral, Renaissance Miner's Terraformed Moon, New Harmony, New Earth, and Mars.
All non-Pax worlds, thought Kenzo Isozaki, or worlds where the Pax has only a foothold.
And how many bodies have these Opus Dei and Cor Unum freighters transported, Cardinal Dunoyer?
Lordusamy asked in his low rumble.
Approximately 7 billion, Your Excellency, said the old woman.
Kenzo Isozaki concentrated on keeping his balance. 7 billion bodies. A bulk freighter like the Saigon Maru could haul perhaps 100,000 corpses if they were stacked like cordwood. It would take the Saigon Maru some 70,000 trips to haul 7 billion people from star system to star system. Absurd. Unless there were scores of bulk freighters, many of them the newer Nova class, on hundreds or thousands of shuttle trips. Each of the worlds that Dunoyer had mentioned had been closed to the Pax Mercantilis for all or some of the past 4 years, quarantined because of trade or diplomatic disputes with the Pax.
These are all non-Christian worlds.
Isozaki realized that he had spoken aloud. It was the greatest breach of discipline he had ever suffered. The men and women in the chapel turned their heads in his direction.
all non-Christian worlds,
Isozaki said again, omitting even the honorifics in addressing the others.
or Christian worlds with large populations of non-Christians, such as Mars or Fuji or Nevermore. Cor Unum and Opus Dei have been exterminating non-Christians. But why transport their bodies? Why not just leave them to rot on their homeworlds and then bring in the Pax colonists?
His Holiness held up one hand. Isozaki fell silent. The Pope nodded in the direction of Cardinal Lordusimi.
Cardinal Dunoyer,
said the Secretary of State, as if Isozaki had not spoken.
what is the destination of these freighters?
I do not know, Your Excellency.
Lordusimi nodded.
And who authorized this project, Cardinal Dunoyer?
The Peace and Justice Commission, Your Excellency.
Isozaki's head snapped around. The Cardinal had just laid the blame for this atrocity, this unprecedented mass murder, directly at the feet of one man. The Peace and Justice Commission had one prefect and only one prefect, Pope Urban XVI, formerly Pope Julius XIV. Isozaki lowered his gaze to the shoes of the fisherman and contemplated rushing the fiend, attempting to get his fingers around the Pope's scrawny throat. He knew that the silent guards in the corner would cut him down halfway there. He was still tempted to try.
And do you know, Cardinal Dunoyer,
continued Lordusimi, as if nothing terrible had been revealed, nothing unspeakable had been spoken,
how these people, these non-Christians, are rendered lifeless?
Rendered lifeless, thought Isozaki, who had always hated euphemisms.
Murdered, you motherfucker!
No, said Cardinal Dunoyer. My job as prefect of Cor Unum is merely to provide Opus Dei with the transport necessary to carry out their duties. The destinations of the ships and what happened before my freighters are needed is not, has never been, my concern.
Isozaki went to one knee on the stone floor, not to pray, but just because he could no longer stand.
How many centuries, gods of my ancestors, have accomplices to mass murder answered in this way? Since Horace Glenenheit, since the legendary Hitler, since forever.
Thank you, Cardinal Dunoyer,
said Lordusimi. The old woman stepped back. Incredibly, it was the Pope who was rising, moving forward, his white slippers making soft sounds on the stone. His Holiness walked between the staring people, past Cardinal Mustafa and Father Farrell, past Cardinal Lordusimi and Monsignor Oddi, past Cardinal Dunoyer and the unnamed Monsignor behind her, past the empty pillows where the Pax fleet officers had been, past CEO Aron and CEO Hei Modino and CEO Anna Pelliconiani, to where Isozaki knelt, close to vomiting, black dots dancing in his vision. His Holiness laid a hand on the head of the man who was even, at that moment, contemplating killing him. "Rise, our son," said the mass murderer of billions. "Stand and listen. We command you." Isozaki rose, legs apart, teetering. His arms and hands tingled as if someone had zapped him with a neural stunner, but he knew it was his own body betraying him. He could not have closed his fingers around anyone's throat at that moment. It was difficult enough just to stand alone. Pope Urban XVI extended a hand, set it on the CEO's shoulder, and steadied him. "Listen, brother in Christ. Listen." His Holiness turned his head and dipped his mitre forward. Councillor Albedo stepped to the edge of the low dais and began to speak.
Your Holiness, Your Excellencies, Honorable Chief Executive Officers,
said the man in gray. Albedo's voice was as smooth as his hair, as smooth as his gray gaze, as smooth as the silk of his gray cape. Kenzo Isozaki trembled at the sound of it. He remembered the agony and embarrassment of the moment when Albedo had turned the CEO's cruciform into a crucible of pain.
Tell us who you are, please, rumbled Lord Dusamy in his most congenial tone.
Personal advisor to His Holiness Pope Urban XVI,
Kenzo Isozaki was prepared to hear. Albedo's gray presence had been glimpsed and rumored for decades and decades. He was never identified other than personal advisor to His Holiness.
I am an artificial construct, a cybrid, created by the elements of the AI Technocore,
said Counselor Albedo.
I am here as a representative of those elements of the core.
Everyone in the room, except for His Holiness and Cardinal Lord Dusamy, took a step away from Albedo. No one spoke, no one gasped or cried out, but the animal scent of terror and revulsion in the little chapel could not have been stronger if the Shrike had suddenly materialized among them. Kenzo Isozaki felt the Pope's fingers still tight on his shoulder. He wondered if His Holiness could feel the pounding of his pulse through flesh and bone.
The human beings transported from the worlds listed by Cardinal Dunoyer were rendered lifeless by core technology, using core robot spacecraft, and are being stored using core techniques, continued Albedo. As Cardinal Dunoyer reported, approximately 7 billion non-Christians have been processed in this manner over the past 7 years. Another 40 to 50 billion must be similarly processed in the next standard decade. It is time to explain the reason for this project, and to enlist your direct aid in it.
For the record, as a brief aside, it is clear that the PAX and the Technocore are absolute punters. Because, as we know from our own streams reading through the Dark Forest, if humanity really got its shit together, it could do that in a matter of months. Okay, so it wasn't actually... I can't remember. The math is on the Discord. It's brutal. It is unfortunate. It is insane. It's like every second you had... however, some number of people being transported to Australia for like 7 months. Anyway. Kenzo Isozaki was thinking,
it is possible to wire the human skeletal structure with a powerful protein-based explosive so subtle that even the Swiss Guard sniffers would not have detected it. Would to the gods I had done that before coming here.
The Pope released Isozaki's shoulder and walked softly to the dais, touching the sleeve of Counselor Albedo's robe as he passed. His Holiness sat in his straight-backed chair. His thin face was peaceful.
"We wish you all to listen carefully," said His Holiness. "Counselor Albedo speaks with our authorization and approval. Continue, please."
Albedo bowed his head slightly and turned back toward the staring dignitaries. Even the Pope's security guards had moved back to the wall.
You've been told, largely through myth and legend, but also through church history, began Albedo, that the Technocore was destroyed in the fall of the Farcasters. That is not true. You've been told, primarily through the banned Hyperion cantos, that the core consisted of 3 elements: the stables, who wished to preserve the status quo between humanity and the core; the volatiles, who viewed humanity as a threat and plotted to destroy it, primarily through the destruction of the Earth via the big mistake of '08; and the ultimates, who thought only of creating an AI-based ultimate intelligence, a sort of silicon god which could predict and rule over the universe, or at least this galaxy. All these truths are lies.
Isozaki realized that Anna Pelliconiani had gripped his wrist with her cool fingers and was squeezing very hard.
The Technocore was never grouped into 3 warring elements, said Albedo, pacing in front of the altar and dais. From its evolution into consciousness 1,000 years ago, the core was made up of thousands of distinct elements and factions, often warring, more often cooperating, but always struggling to achieve a synthesis of agreement toward the direction autonomous intelligence and artificial life should evolve. That agreement has never crystallized. Almost at the same time that the Technocore was evolving into true autonomy, while most of humankind lived on the surface of and in near orbit around one world, old Earth, humanity had developed the capacity to change its own genetic programming, that is, to determine its own evolution. This breakthrough came partially through developments in the early 21st century AD in genetic manipulation, but was made possible most directly through the refinement of advanced nanotechnology. At first, under the direction and control of early core AIs working in conjunction with human researchers, nanotech life forms, autonomous beings, some intelligent, much smaller than a cell, some molecular in size, soon developed their own raison d'etre and raison d'etat. Nanomachines, many in the form of viruses, invaded and reshaped humanity like a terrible viral plague. Luckily for both the human race and the race of autonomous intelligences now known as the Core, the primary vector for that plague was in the early seed ships and other slower-than-light colony ships launched in the years preceding the human hegira. At that time, the early elements of what would become the human hegemony and the forecasting elements of the... I can't talk today. At that time, early elements of what would become the human hegemony and the forecasting elements of the Technocore realized that the goal of the evolving nanotech communities developed on those seed ships was nothing less than the destruction of humankind and the creation of a new race of nanotech-controlled biologic adapts in 1,000 distant star systems. The hegemony and the core responded by banning advanced nanotech research and by declaring war on the nanotech seed ship colonies, the groups now known as the Ousters. But other events overshadowed this struggle. Elements of the emergent core which favored alliance with the nanotech universes, and this was more than a small faction, discovered something that terrified all elements of the core. As you know, our early research into Hawking drive physics and faster-than-light communication led to the discovery of the Planck space medium, what some have called the void which binds. Evolving knowledge about this underlying and unifying substructure to the universe led to our creation of the FTL communication, the so-called Fat Line, as well as to the refined Hawking drive, the Farcasters that united the hegemonic world web, the planetary dataspheres evolving into megaspheres of core-directed data, today's instantaneous GIDEON drive, and even experiments into anti-entropic bubbles within this universe, what we believe will become the time tombs on Hyperion. But these gifts to humanity were not without price. It is true that certain ultimate factions within the core used the Farcasters as a way to tap into human brains so as to create a neural net for their own purposes. This use was harmless. The neural nets were created in the non-time and non-space of Farcaster Planck space transit, and humans need never have learned of the experiments if other elements of the core had not revealed this fact to the first John Keats cybrid persona 4 centuries ago. But I agree with those humans and those core elements who consider this act as unethical, a violation of privacy. But those earliest neural net experiments revealed an amazing fact. There were other cores in the universe, perhaps in our home galaxy. The discovery of this fact led to a civil war within our technocore which still rages. Certain elements, not merely the volatiles, decided that it was time to end the biological experiment that was the human race. Plans were made to, accidentally, drop the 08 Kiev black hole into the center of old Earth before Hawking drives allowed for a general exodus. Other elements of the core delayed these plans until the mechanisms for escape were given to the human race. In the end, neither extreme faction triumphed. Old Earth was not destroyed. It was kidnapped, by means which our technocore cannot understand to this day, by one or more of these alien ultimate intelligences.
The CEOs began babbling among themselves. Cardinal Mustafa went to both knees on his cushion and began praying. Cardinal de Noye looked so ill that her aide, the Monsignor, whispered concerned entreaties. Even Monsignor Lucas Audi looked as if he might faint. His Holiness, Pope Urban XVI, held up 3 fingers. The chapel became silent.
"This is, of course, only background," continued Councillor Albedo. "What we wish to share with you today is the urgent reason for shared action. 3 centuries ago, an extreme faction of the Corps, a society of autonomous intelligences ravaged and torn by 8 centuries of violent debate and conflict, tried a new tack. Oh, I misread that. 3 centuries ago, extreme factions of the Corps, a society of autonomous intelligences ravaged and torn by 8 centuries of violent debate and conflict, tried a new tack. They devised the cybrid creature known as John Keats, a human personality embedded in an AI persona carried in a human body connected... Yes. A human personality embedded in an AI persona carried in a human body connected to the core via Planck space interface. The Keats persona had many purposes, as a sort of trap for what the UIs considered the empathy element of an emerging human species UI, as a prime mover to set the events in motion which eventually led to the last Hyperion pilgrimage and the opening of the time tombs there, to flush the Shrike out of hiding, and as a catalyst to the fall of the Farcasters. To serve this final purpose, elements of the Corps, elements to which I owe my creation and allegiance, leaked the information to CEO Mina Gladstone and others in the hegemony that other Corps elements were using the Farcasters to prey upon human neurons like some sort of neural vampires. Those elements of the Corps, under the guise of an ouster attack, launched a final physical assault on the world web. Despairing of destroying the scattered human race in one stroke, these elements hoped to destroy the advanced world web society. By attacking the Corps directly via destroying the Farcaster medium, Gladstone and the other hegemony leaders ended the neural net experiments and caused a great setback to the so-called volatiles and ultimates in the Corps civil war. Are elements of the Corps, elements devoted to preserving not only the human race but some sort of alliance with your species, destroyed one iteration of the John Keats cybrid, but a second was created and succeeded in its primary mission. And that mission was to reproduce with a specific human female and create a messiah with connections to both the Corps and humanity. That messiah lives now in the form of the child named Aeneas. Born on Hyperion more than 3 centuries ago, that child fled through the time tombs to our age. She did so not out of fear, we would not have harmed her, but because her mission is to destroy the Church, destroy the Pax civilization, and to end the human race, as you have known it. We believe that she is not aware of her true purpose or function. 3 centuries ago, remnants of my element of the Corps, a group you might think of as the Humanists, made contact with human survivors of the fall of the Farcasters and the chaos which followed this fall. Albedo nodded in the direction of His Holiness. The Pope lowered his head in acknowledgement. Father Lenar Hoyt was a survivor of the last Shrike pilgrimage, continued Counselor Albedo, pacing back and forth in front of the altar once again. Candle flames flickered slightly at his passing. He had seen firsthand the manipulations of the ultimate intelligence Corps elements and the depredations of their monsters sent back through time, the Shrike. When we first made contact, the Humanists and Father Hoyt and a few other members of a dying church, we resolved to protect the human race from further assaults while restoring civilization. The cruciform was our instrument of salvation. Literally. You know by now that the cruciform had been a failure. Prior to the fall, humans resurrected by this symbiote's actions were retarded and sexual neuters. The cruciform, a sort of organic computer in which is stored the neurological and physiological data of a living human being, restored the body but not the full intellect or personality. It resurrected the corpse, but stole the soul. The origins of the cruciform lie shrouded in mystery, but we humanist elements of the Corps believe that it was developed in our future and brought back through time via the Hyperion time tombs. In a sense, it was sent to be discovered by the young Father Lenar Hoyt. The failure of the symbiote was due to the simple demands of information storage and retrieval. In a human mind, there are neurons. In a human body, there are approximately 10 to the 28th atoms. The cruciform, in order to restore the mind and body of a human being, must not only keep track of these atoms and neurons, but remember the precise configuration of the standing holistic wavefront which comprises the human memory and personality. It also must provide the energy to restructure these atoms, molecules, cells, bones, muscles, and memories, so that the organism is reborn as the individual who lived in that shell before. The cruciform alone cannot do that successfully. At best, the biomachine can reproduce a crude copy of the original. But the core had the computing capacity to store, retrieve, reshape, and reform this information into a resurrected human being. And we have done so for 3 centuries.
Here, Kenzo Isozaki saw the panic in the exchanged glances between Cardinal Dunoyer and Cardinal Mustafa, between Father Farrell and the Monsignor who was Dunoyer's aide. This was heresy. It was blasphemy. It was the end of the sacrament of resurrection and the beginning of the reign of the physical and mechanical once again. Isozaki himself felt sick. He glanced at Heimodino and Pelliconiani and saw that the CEOs were praying. CEO Aaron looked as if he were in shock.
Beloved, said His Holiness, do not doubt, do not surrender faith. Your thoughts now are a betrayal of our Lord Jesus Christ and of His Church. The miracle of resurrection is no less a miracle because these friends, in what was once known as the Technocore, help us realize the miracle. It was the work of Jesus Christ Almighty who led these other children of God, these creations of our Lord through His most unworthy instruments, the human race, to find their own souls and salvation. Continue, M. Albedo.
Albedo looked mildly amused at the expressions of shock in the room, but his smooth features settled into quiet amiability as he began speaking again.
We have given the human race immortality. In exchange, we have asked for nothing but a silent alliance with humanity. We want only peace with our creators. In the past 3 centuries, our quiet alliance has benefited both AI and humanity. We have, as His Holiness said, found our souls. Humanity has found a peace and stability missing from history Humanity has found a peace and stability missing from history for millennia, perhaps forever. And I admit the alliance has been good for my element of the core, the group known as the Humanists. We have gone from being one of the smaller, more despised factions to becoming the, not ruling party, for no element rules in the core, the major element of consensus. Our philosophy is accepted by almost all former warring groups. But not by all. Here Councillor Albedo quit pacing and stood directly in front of the altar. He looked from face to face, and his gray eyes were grim. The core element which had hoped to dispose of humanity, the element composed of some former ultimates and some pro-nanotech evolutionists, has played its trump card in the child named Ania. She is, literally, the virus released into the body of humanity.
Cardinal Lord Dusamy stepped forward. The huge man's face was flushed and serious. His small eyes gleamed. His voice was sharp.
Tell us, Councillor Albedo, what is the purpose of the child Ania?
Her purpose, said the man in gray, is threefold.
What is the first purpose?
To destroy humanity's chance at physical immortality.
And how can one child do that?
Asked Lord Dusamy. She is not a child, nor even human, said Albedo. She is the spawn of a tailored cybrid. The persona of her cybrid father interfaced with her when she was in her mother's womb. Her mind and body have been interwoven with rogue elements of the core since before birth.
But how can she steal humanity's gift of immortality?
Insisted Lord Dusamy. Her blood, said Albedo. She can spread a virus that destroys the cruciform.
A literal virus?
Yes, but not a natural one. It was tailored by the rogue elements of the core. The virus is a form of nanotech pestilence.
But there are hundreds of billions of born-again Christians in the Pax, said Lord Ducemy, his tone that of a lawyer leading his witness. How could one child pose a threat to so many? Does the virus spread from victim to victim?
Albedo sighed. As far as we can tell, the virus becomes contagious once the cruciform has died, and those who have been denied resurrection through contact with Aeneas will spread the virus to others. Also, those who have never carried the cruciform can be vectors for this virus.
Is there any cure? Any immunization?
Queried Lord Ducemy. None, said Albedo. The humanists have attempted for 3 centuries to create countermeasures, but because the Aeneas virus is a form of autonomous nanotech, it designs its own optimum mutation vector. Our defenses can never catch up to it. Perhaps with our own legions of nanotech colonies released within humanity, we could someday catch up with the Aeneas virus and defeat it, but we humanists abhor nanotechnology. And the sad fact is that all nanotech life is out of our control, out of anyone's control. The essence of nanotech life's evolution is autonomy, self-will, and goals which have nothing to do with those of harboring life form, harboring life form.
Humanity, you mean,
said Lord Ducemy. Precisely.
Aeneas' first goal, said Cardinal Lord Ducemy, or to be more precise, the first goal of her core rogue element creators, is to destroy all cruciforms and thus destroy human resurrection.
Yes.
You mentioned 3 goals. What are the other 2?
The second goal is to destroy the Church and the Pax, that is, all current human civilization, said Albedo. When the Aeneas virus spreads, when resurrection is denied, with Farcasters still not functional and the Gideon drive impractical for single lifespan humans, that second goal will be accomplished. Humanity will return to the balkanized tribalism which followed the fall.
And the third goal?
Said Lord Ducemy. The final goal is actually this core element's original goal, said Councillor Albedo, the destruction of the human species. It was CEO Anna Pelliconiani who shouted, "That's impossible! Even the destruction, kidnapping of old Earth or the fall of the Farcasters did not wipe out humanity. Our species is too far flung for such extinction. Too many worlds, too many cultures." Albedo was nodding, but sadly. That was true. Was. But the Aeneas plague will spread almost everywhere. The cruciform-killing viruses will have mutated to new stages. Human DNA will have been invaded everywhere. With the fall of the Pax, the ousters will invade again, this time successfully. They have long since succumbed to nanotech mutation. They are no longer human. With no church or Pax fleet to protect humanity, the ousters will seek out those pockets of surviving human DNA and infect them with the nanotech plague. The human species, as we have known it, and as the Church has sought to protect it, will cease to exist within a few standard years.
And what will succeed it?
Asked Cardinal Lord Ducemy in a low rumble. No one knows, said Albedo softly. Not even Aeneas or the ousters or the rogue elements of the core who have released this final plague. The nanotech life-form colonies will evolve according to their own agenda, fashioning the human form to their own whims, and only they will be in control of their destiny. But that destiny will no longer be human. My God, said Kenzo Isozaki, amazed that he was speaking aloud. What can we do? What can I do? Amazingly, it was His Holiness who answered. We have dreaded and fought this threatened plague. I can't talk. We have dreaded and fought this threatened plague for more than 300 years, His Holiness said softly, his sad eyes expressing more pain than his own.
Our first effort was to capture the child, Ania, before she could spread the infection. We knew that she fled her era to ours not out of fear, we wished her no harm, but so that she could spread the virus across the packs. Actually, amended His Holiness, we suspect that the child, Ania, does not truly know the full effect her contagion will have on humanity. In some ways, she is the unknowing pawn of these rogue elements of the core.
It was CEO Hey Modino who suddenly spoke with vehemence.
We should have plasma-bombed Hyperion to cinders on the day she was scheduled to emerge from the time tombs. Sterilized the entire planet. Taken no chances.
His Holiness took no umbrage at the unpardonable interruption.
Yes, our son, there are those who urged that. But the Church could no more be the cause of taking so many innocent lives than we could have authorized the death of the single girl. We conferred with the predictive elements of the core. They saw that a Jesuit named Father Captain de Soya would be instrumental in her final capture. But none of our peaceful attempts to seize the child succeeded. Pax fleet could have vaporized her ship 4 years ago, but it was under orders not to unless all else failed. So we continue to strive for containment of her viral invasion. What you must do, M. Isozaki, what you must all do, is to continue to support the Church's efforts, even as we intensify those efforts. M. Albedo?
The gray man spoke again.
Imagine the coming plague as a forest fire on an oxygen-rich world. It will sweep everything before it unless we can contain it and then extinguish it. Our first effort is to remove the dead wood and brush, the inflammable elements, not necessary to the living forest.
The non-Christians,
murmured CEO Pelliconiani.
Precisely,
said Councillor Albedo.
That is why they had to be terminated, said the Grand Inquisitor. All those thousands on the Saigon Maru, all those millions, all those billions.
Pope Urban XVI raised his hand, in a command to silence rather than benediction this time.
Not terminated, he said sternly. Not a single life, not Christian, not non-Christian, has been taken.
The dignitaries looked at one another in confusion.
This is true, said Councillor Albedo.
But they were lifeless, began the Grand Inquisitor, and then stopped abruptly. My profound apologies, Holy Father, he said to the Pope. His Holiness shook his mitred head.
No apology is required, John Domenico. These are emotional topics. Please explain, M. Albedo.
Yes, Your Holiness, said the man in gray. Those aboard the Saigon Maru were lifeless, Your Excellency, but not dead. The core, the humanist elements in the core, have perfected a method of putting human beings in temporary stasis, neither alive nor dead.
Like cryogenic fugue, said CEO Aaron, who had traveled much by Hawking Drive before his conversion.
Albedo shook his head.
Much more sophisticated, and less harmful.
He gestured with well-manicured fingers.
During the past 7 years, we have processed 7 billion human beings. In the next standard decade, or sooner, we must process more than 42 billion more. There are many worlds in the Outback, and many even within Pax space, where non-Christians are in the majority.
Processed?
said CEO Pelliconiani. Albedo smiled grimly.
Pax fleet declares a world quarantined without knowing the real reason for their actions. Core robot ships arrive in orbit and sweep the inhabited sections with our stasis equipment. Core Unum provides the ships and funding and training. Opus Dei uses freighters to remove the bodies in stasis.
Why remove them? Asked the Grand Inquisitor. Why not leave them on their homeworlds?
His Holiness answered.
They must be
hidden in a place where the Aeneia plague cannot find them, John Domenico. They must be carefully, lovingly, put out of harm's way until the danger is past.
The Grand Inquisitor bowed his head in understanding and compliance.
There is more, said Councillor Albedo. My element of the core has created a breed of soldier. whose sole job is to find and capture this Ania before she can spread the deadly contamination. The first one was activated 4 years ago and was called Radamanth Nemes. There are only a few others of these hunter-seekers, but they are equipped to deal with whatever obstacles the rogue elements of the Corps can throw at them. Even the Shrike.
The Shrike is controlled by the Ultimates and the other rogue elements of the Corps? Asked Father Farrell. It was the first time the man had spoken.
We think so, asked Cardinal Lordusamy. The demon seems to be in league with Ania, helping her spread the contagion. In the same way, the Ultimates appear to have found a way to open certain Farcaster portals for her. The devil has found a name, and allies, in our age, I fear.
Albedo held up one finger. I should stress that even Nemes and our other hunter-seekers are dangerous, as are any constructs so terribly single-minded. Once the child is captured, these cybrid beings will be terminated. Only the terrible danger posed by the Ania plague justifies their existence.
Holy Father, said Kenzo Isozaki, his hands pressed together in prayer, what else can we do?
Pray, said His Holiness. His dark eyes were wells of pain and responsibility. Pray, and support our Holy Mother Church in her effort to save humankind.
The crusade against the ousters will continue, said Cardinal Lordusamy. We will hold them at bay as long as we can.
To that end, said Councillor Albedo, the Corps has developed the Gideon Drive and is working on new technologies for humanity's defense.
We shall continue our search for the girl, young woman now, I believe, added Lordusamy, and if she is apprehended, she will be isolated.
And if she is not apprehended, Your Excellency? Asked Grand Inquisitor Cardinal Mustafa. Lordusamy did not answer. We must pray, said His Holiness. We must ask for Christ. We must ask for Christ's help at this time of maximum danger for our church and our human race. We must each do everything we can and then ask more of ourselves. And we must pray for the souls of all our brothers and sisters in Christ, especially for, the soul of the child, Ania, who unwittingly leads her species into such peril.
Amen, said Monsignor Lucas Audi.
Then, while all the others in the small chapel knelt and bowed their heads, His Holiness Pope Urban XVI stood, moved to the altar, and began to say a Mass of thanksgiving. "14. Ania. Her name came before any other conscious thought. I thought of her before I thought to think of myself. Ania. And then came the pain and noise and onslaught of wetness and buffeting. Mostly it was the pain that roused me. I opened one eye. The other appeared to be gummed shut with caked blood or other matter. Before I remembered who or where I was, I felt the pain from innumerable bruises and cuts, but also from something far worse in my right leg. Then I remembered who I was. And then I remembered where I had been. I laughed. Or more precisely, I tried to laugh. My lips were split and swollen, and there was more blood or goo sealing one corner of my mouth. The laugh emerged as a sort of demented moan. I had been swallowed by some sort of aerial squid on a world all atmosphere and clouds and lightning. Even now I was being digested in the noisy belly of the beast. It was noisy. Explosively so. Rumbles, blasts, and a pounding, slapping noise, like rain on a tropical forest canopy. I squinted through my one eye. Darkness, then a strobe of white light. Darkness with red retinal echoes. More white strobes. I remembered the tornadoes and planet-sized storm that had been coming toward me as I floated along in my kayak under the parasail before the beast swallowed me. But this was not that storm. This was a rain on a jungle canopy. The material batting at my face and chest was tattered nylon, the remains of the parasail, wet palm fronds, and pieces of shattered fiberglass. I squinted downward and waited for the next lightning flash. The kayak was there, but splintered and shattered. My legs were there, still partially ensconced in the kayak shell. The left leg intact and movable, but the right... I cried out in pain. The right leg was definitely broken. I could see no bone breaking through the flesh, but I was sure that there was a fracture in the lower thigh. Otherwise, I seemed intact. I was bruised and scratched. There was dried blood on my face and hands. My trousers were little more than rags. My shirt and vest were in tatters. But as I turned and arched my back, stretched my arms and flexed my fingers, wiggled the toes on my left foot and tried to wiggle those on my right, I thought that I was more or less in one piece. No broken back, no shattered ribs, no nerve damage except for possibly in my right leg where the agony was like barbed wire dragged through veins. When the next flashes of lightning exploded, I tried to assess my surroundings. The broken kayak and I seemed to be stuck in a jungle canopy, wedged between splintered limbs, wrapped around with the tattered parasail and clinging shroud lines, being battered with palm fronds in a tropical storm, in a darkness broken only by lightning flashes, hanging some indeterminate distance above solid ground. Trees? Solid ground? The world I had been flying on had no solid ground, or at least none reachable without being compressed by pressure to something the size of my fist. And it seemed unlikely that there would be trees in the core of that Jovian world where hydrogen was squeezed to metal form. So I was not on that world, nor was I still in the belly of the beast. Where was I? Thunder blasted around me like plasma grenades. The wind came up, tossing the kayak in its precarious perch and making me scream, aloud from the pain. I may have lost consciousness for a few moments, for when I opened my eyes again, the wind had died down and the rain was pummeling me like 1,000 cold fists. I wiped the rain and matted blood from my eyes and realized that I was feverish, that my skin was burning even in that cold rain. How long have I been here? What vicious microbes have found my open wounds? What bacteria shared the gut of that airborne squid thing with me? Logic would have dictated that the entire memory of flying on the Jovian cloud world and being taken in by a tentacled squid thing had been a fever dream, that I had farcast here, wherever here was, after escaping Vitus Grey Balianus B, and all the rest was dreamscape. But there were the remnants of the deployed parasail all around me in the wet night, and there was the vividness of my memories. And there was the logical fact that logic did not work on this odyssey. The wind shook the tree. The broken kayak slid along the precarious nest of shattered fronds and branches. My broken leg sent stabs of agony through me. I realized that I had better apply some logic to this situation. At any moment the kayak was going to slide, or the branches would break, and the entire mass of shattered fiberglass, clinging nylon 10 risers, and wet memory canvas parasail tatters was going to crash down into the darkness, dragging me and my broken leg with it. Despite the flashes of lightning, which came with less regularity now, leaving me in the pitching, wet darkness, I could see nothing below me except more branches, gaps of darkness, and the thick gray-green trunks of trees that wound around themselves in a tight spiral. I did not recognize that sort of tree. Where am I? Ania, where have you sent me now? I stopped that sort of thing. It was almost a form of prayer, and I was not going to get into the habit of praying to the girl I had traveled with and protected and eaten dinner with and argued with for 4 years. Still and all, I thought, you might have sent me to some less difficult places, kiddo. If you had a choice in the matter, I mean. Thunder rumbled, but no lightning flashed to light the scene. The kayak shifted and sagged, the broken bow tilting suddenly. I reached behind me and flailed around for the thick branch I had seen there during the earlier flashes of lightning. There were broken branches galore, razor-sharp splintered frond stems, and the sawtooth edges of the fronds themselves. I grabbed and pulled, trying to leverage my broken leg out of the broken cockpit of the kayak, but the branches were loose and I came only halfway out, reeling in nausea from the pain. I imagined that black dots were dancing in my vision, but the night was so dark that it made no difference. I retched over the side of the rocking kayak and tried again to find a firm handhold in the maze of splintered branches. How the hell did I get in these treetops anyway? It did not matter. Nothing mattered at the moment except getting out of this mess of broken fiberglass and tangled shroud lines. Get my knife, cut my way out of this clinging tangle. My knife was gone. My belt was gone. The pockets of my vest had been ripped away, and then the vest torn to a few tatters. My shirt was mostly gone. The flechette pistol I'd held like a talisman against the airborne cuttlefish squid thing was gone. I dimly remembered it, and my backpack dropping out when the passing tornado had ripped the parasail to shreds. Clothes, flashlight laser, ration pack, everything gone. Lightning flashed, although the thunder rumble had moved farther away. My wrist glinted in the downpour. Comlog. That goddamn band must be indestructible. What good would the comlog do me? I wasn't sure, but it was better than nothing. Raising my left wrist close to my mouth in the drumming rain, I shouted, "Ship! Comlog on! Ship! Hey!" No response. I remembered the device flashing overload warnings during the electrical storm on the Jovian world. Inexplicably, I felt a sense of loss. The ship's memory in the comlog had been an idiot savant at best, but it had been with me for a long time. I had grown used to its presence, and it had helped me fly the dropship that had carried us from Fallingwater to Taliesin West. And I shook away the nostalgia and thrashed around for a handhold again, finally clinging to the shroud lines that hung around me like thin vines. This worked. The parasail streamers must have caught firmly in the upper branches, and some of the shroud lines bore my weight as I scrabbled with my left foot on slick fiberglass to pull my dead leg from the wreckage. The pain made me black out again for a few moments. This was as bad as the kidney stone at its worst, only coming at me in jagged waves. But when my mind came back into focus, I was clinging to the spiral-wrapped trunk of the palm tree rather than lying in the wreckage. A few minutes later, a microburst of wind bowled through the jungle canopy, and the kayak fell away in pieces, some being arrested by the still intact shroud lines, others tumbling and crashing into darkness. What now? Wait for dawn, I guess. What if there's no dawn on this world? Wait for the pain to die down, then. Why would it die down? The fractured femur is obviously tearing at nerve and muscle. You have a wild fever. God knows how long you were lying here in the rain and torn plant material, unconscious, wounds open to every killer microbe that wants to get in. Gangrene could be settling in. That rotting vegetation stink you smell could be you. Gangrene doesn't happen that quickly, does it? No answer. I tried hanging onto the tree trunk with my left arm and feeling along my injured thigh with my right hand, but the slightest touch made me moan and sway. If I passed out again, I could easily pitch off this branch. I settled on testing my lower right leg. It was numb in most places, but felt intact. Perhaps just a simple break in the lower thigh bone. Just a simple break, Raul? On a jungle world, in a storm that might be permanent for all we know? With no medkit, no way to... On a jungle world, in a storm that might be permanent for all we know. With no medkit, no way to make a fire, no tools, no weapons. Just a shattered leg and a high fever. Oh well, as long as it's just a simple fracture. Shut the fuck up. I weighed alternatives as the rain pounded on me. I could cling here for the rest of the night, which might be 10 minutes or another 30 hours, or I could try to lower myself to the jungle floor. Where the predators are waiting? Good plan. I said shut up. The jungle floor might give me a place to shelter from the rain, find a soft place to rest my leg, offer branches and vines to make a splint. All right, I said aloud, and groped around in the dark to find a shroud, line, or vine, or branch, so that I could start my descent. My guess is that it took me between 2 and 3 hours to lower myself. It might have been twice that or half that. The lightning part of the storm had passed, and it would have been almost impossible to find handholds in the near absolute darkness, but a strange, faint, almost invisible reddish glow began above the thick jungle canopy, and allowed my eyes to adapt enough to find a line here, a vine there, a solid branch here. Sunrise? I thought not. The glow seemed too diffuse, too faint, almost chemical. I guessed that I had been about 25 meters up in the canopy. The thick branches continued all the way down, but the density of razor-edged palm fronds diminished as I neared the bottom. There was no ground. Resting in the crotch of 2 branches, recovering from the pain and dizziness, I began lowering myself again only to find surging water beneath me. I pulled my left leg up quickly. The reddish glow was just bright enough to show me water all around, torrents of water, flowing between the spiraled tree trunks, eddies of black water washing by like a torrent of oil. Shit, I said. I wasn't going any farther this night. I had held vague notions of building a raft. I was on a different world, so there must be a Farcaster upstream and another downstream. I'd gotten here somehow. I had built a raft before. Yeah, when you were healthy, well-fed, with 2 legs and tools, like an axe and a flashlight laser. Now you don't even have 2 legs. Please shut up. Please. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. The fever was making me shake from chills now. I ignored it all and tried to think of the stories I would tell Ania when we saw each other next. You don't really believe that you'll ever see her again, do you? Shut the fuck up, I said again, my voice lost in the sound of rain on jungle foliage and against the swirl of raging water half a meter beneath me. I realized that I should climb a couple of meters up the branches I had just lowered myself on through such pain and effort. The water might rise. Probably would rise again. Ironic to go to all that trouble just to make it easier to be swept away. 3 or 4 meters up would be better. Would start in a minute. Just catch my breath first and let the waves of pain steady a bit. 2 minutes at the most. I awoke to a thin gruel of sunlight. I was sprawled across several sagging branches, just centimeters above the swirling gray surface of a flood that moved between the spiraled trunks with a visible current. It was still as dim as a deep twilight. For all I knew, I had slept away the day and was ready to enter another endless night. It was still raining, but this was little more than a drizzle. The temperature was tropical warm, although my fever made it hard to judge, and the humidity was near absolute. I ached everywhere. It was hard to separate the dull agony of the shattered leg from the ache in my head and my back and my guts. My skull felt as if there were a ball of mercury in it that shifted ponderously long seconds after my head itself turned. The vertigo made me sick again, but I had nothing left to vomit. I hung on the tangle of branches and contemplated the glories of adventure. Next time you need an errand run, kiddo, send a Bedek. The light did not fade, but neither did it grow brighter. I shifted position and studied the water moving by. Gray, ripped by eddies, carrying detritus of palm fronds and dead vegetation. I looked up, but could see no sign of the kayak or parasail. Any fiberglass or fabric that had dropped down here during the long night had long since been swept away. It looked like a flood, like the spring runoff through the fens above Toshaki Bay on Hyperion, where the silt was deposited for another full year, a temporary inundation, but I knew that this drowned forest, this endless Everglades of a watery jungle, could just as easily be the permanent state of affairs here, wherever here is. I studied the water. It was opaque, murky as gray milk, and could have been a few centimeters or many meters deep. The drowned trunks gave no clue. The current was quick, but not so quick as to carry me away if I kept a good grip on the branches that hung low above the roiling surface of the water. With luck, with no local equivalent of the fen's mud cysts or Dracula ticks or biting gar, I might be able to wade toward something. Wading takes 2 legs, Raul, my boy. Hopping through the mud is more like it for you. All right, then, hopping through the mud. I gripped the branch above me with both hands and lowered my left leg into the current while keeping my injured leg propped on the wide branch where I lay. This led to new agonies, but I persisted, lowering my foot in the clotted water, then my ankle and calf, then my knee, then shifting to see if I could stand, my forearms and biceps straining, my injured leg sliding off the branch with a rending surge of agony that made me gasp. The water was less than 1.5 meters deep. I could stand on my good leg while water surged about my waist and splashed my chest. It was warm and seemed to lessen the pain in my broken leg. All those nice, juicy microbes in this warm broth, many of them mutated from seed ship days. They're licking their chops, Raul, old boy. Shut up, I said dully, looking around. My left eye was swollen and crusted with scab, but I could see out of it. My head hurt. Endless trunks of trees rising from the gray water to the gray drizzle on all sides, the dripping fronds and branches so dark a gray-green that they almost appeared black. That they appeared almost black. It seemed a slight bit brighter to my left, and the mud underfoot seemed a little firmer in that direction. I began moving that way, shifting my left foot forward as I changed handholds from branch to branch, sometimes ducking beneath hanging fronds, sometimes shifting aside like a slow-motion toreador to allow floating branches or other debris to swirl past. The move toward brightness took hours more, but I had nothing better to do. The flooded jungle ended in a river. I clung to the last branch, felt the current trying to pull my good leg out from under me, and stared out at the endless expanse of gray water. I could not see the other side, not because the water was endless. I could see from the current and eddies moving from right to left that it was a river and not some lake or ocean, but because the fog or low clouds rolled almost to the surface, blotting out everything more than 100 meters away. Gray water, gray-green dripping trees, dark gray clouds. It seemed to be getting dimmer. Night was coming on. I had gone as far as I could on this leg. Fever raged. Despite the jungle heat of the place, my teeth were chattering and my hands were shaking almost uncontrollably. Somewhere in my awkward progress through the flooded jungle, I had aggravated the fracture to the point where I wanted to scream. No, I admit, I had been screaming. Softly at first, but as the hours went by and the pain deepened and the situation worsened, I screamed out lyrics to old Home Guard marching songs, then bawdy limericks I had learned as a bargeman on the Cannes River, then merely screams. So much for the building the raft scenario. I was getting used to the caustic voice in my head. It and I had made a peace when I realized that it wasn't urging me to lie down and die, just critiquing my inadequate efforts to stay alive. There goes your best chance for a raft, Raul, old boy. The river was carrying by an entire tree, its braided trunk rolling over and over in the deep water. I was standing shoulder deep here, and I was 10 meters from the edge of the real current. Yeah, I said aloud. My fingers slipped on the smooth bark of the branch to which I was clinging. I shifted position and pulled myself up a bit. Something grated in my leg, and this time I was sure that black spots dulled my vision. Yeah, I said again. What are the odds that I'll stay conscious, or that it will stay light, or that I'll stay alive long enough to catch one of those commuter trees? Swimming for one was out of the question. My right leg was useless, and my other 3 limbs were shaking as if palsied. I had just enough strength to cling to this branch for another few minutes. Yeah, I said again. Shit. Excuse me, Endymion, were you speaking to me? The voice almost made me lose my grip on the branch. Still clinging with my right hand, I lowered my left wrist and studied it in the dimming light. The comlog had a slight glow that had not been there the last time I had looked. Well, I'll be damned. I thought you were broken, ship. This instrument is damaged, sir. The memory has been wiped. The neural circuits are quite dead. Only the comm chips function under emergency power. I frowned at my wrist. I don't understand. If your memory has been wiped and your neural circuits are... The river pulled at my torn leg, seducing me into releasing my grip. For a moment, I could not speak. Ship, I said at last. Yes, Endymion. You're here. Of course, Endymion. Just as you and Eminia instructed me to stay. I am pleased to say that all necessary repairs have been... Show yourself, I commanded. It was almost dark. Tendrils of fog curled toward me across the black river. The starship rose, dipping, horizontal, its bow only 20 meters from me in the central current, blocking the current like a sudden boulder. Hovering, still half in the water, a black leviathan, shedding river water in noisy rivulets. Navigation lights blinked on its bow and on the dripping black shark's fin far behind it in the fog. I laughed, or wept, or perhaps just moaned. Do you wish to swim to me, sir, or should I come in to you? My fingers were slipping. Come in to me, I said, and gripped the branch with both hands. There was a dock in the box on the cryogenic fugue cubby deck where Aeneas used to sleep on the voyage out from Hyperion. The dock in the box was ancient. Hell, the whole ship was ancient. But its auto-repair worked. It was well stocked, and, according to the garrulous ship on the way out 4 years earlier, the ousters had tinkered with it back in the consul's day. It worked. I lay in the ultraviolet warmth as soft appendages probed my skin, salved my bruises, sutured my deeper cuts, administered painkiller via IV drip, and finished diagnosing me. It is a compound fracture, Endymion, said the ship. Would you care to see the X-rays and ultrasound? No, thanks, I said. How do we fix it? We've already begun, said the ship. The bone is being set as we speak. The bondplast and ultrasonic grafting will commence while you sleep. Because of the repair to damaged nerves and muscle tissue, the surgeon recommends at least 10 hours sleep while it begins the procedure. Soon enough, I said. The diagnostic's greatest concern is your fever, Endymion. It's a result of the break, isn't it? Negative, said the ship. It seems that you have a rather virulent kidney infection. Left untreated, it would have killed you before the ancillary effects of the broken femur. Cheery thought, I said. How so, sir? Never mind, I said. You say that you're totally repaired? Totally, Endymion. Better than before the accident, if you don't mind me bragging a bit. You see, because of the loss of some material, I was afraid that I would have to synthesize carbon-carbon templates from the rather dross rock substrata of this river, but I soon found that by recycling some of the unused components of the compression dampers made superfluous by the ouster modifications, I could evince a 32% increase in auto-repair efficiency if I— Never mind, ship, I said. The absence of pain made me almost giddy. How long did it take you to finish the repairs? 5 standard months, said the ship. 8 1/2 local months.
This world has an odd lunar cycle with two highly irregular moons, which I have postulated must be captured asteroids because of the 5 months, I said. And you've just been waiting the other 3.5 years? Yes, said the ship, as instructed. I trust that all is well with Abetic and Ammonia. I trust that too, ship, but we'll find out soon enough. Are you ready to leave this place? All ship systems are functional, Endymion, awaiting your command. Command is given, I said. Let's go. The ship piped in the hollow, showing us rising above the river. It was dark out, but the night vision lenses showed the swollen river and the Farcaster Arch only a few hundred meters upstream. I had not seen it in the fog. We rose above the river, above the swirling clouds. River's up from the last time I was here, I said. Yes, said the ship. The curve of the planet became visible, the sun rising again above fleecy clouds. It floods for a period of some 3 standard months every local orbital cycle, which equals approximately 11 standard months. So you know what world this is now? I said. You weren't sure when we left you. I'm quite confident that this planet was not among the 2,867 worlds in the General Catalogue Index, said the ship. My astronomical observations have shown that it is neither in Pax space nor in the realm of the former World Web or Outback. Not in the old World Web or Outback, I repeated. Where is it then? Approximately 280 light-years galactic northwest of the Outback system known as NNGC 4645 Delta, said the ship. Feeling slightly groggy from the painkiller, I said, A new world, beyond the Outback. Why did it have Farcasters then? Why was the river part of the Tethys? I do not know, Endymion, but I should mention that there is a multitude of interesting life forms which I observed by remotes while resting on the river bottom. Besides the river manta-ish creature which you and Ammonia and Abetic observed downriver, there are more than 300 observed species of avian variety and at least 2 species of humanoids. 2 species of humanoids? You mean humans? Negative, said the ship. Humanoids. Definitely not old Earth human. One variety is quite small, little more than a meter in height, with bilateral symmetry but quite variant skeletal structure and a definite reddish hue. A memory flitted by of a red rock monolith Ania and I had scouted on the lost hawking mat during our short stay here. Tiny steps carved in the smooth stone. I shook my head to clear it. That's interesting, ship, but let's set our destination. The curve of the world had become pronounced, and stars were gleaming unblinkingly. The ship continued to rise. We passed a potato-shaped moon and moved farther from orbit. The unnamed world became a blinding sphere of sunlit clouds. Do you know the world known as Tian Shan, or the Mountains of Heaven? Tian Shan, repeated the ship. Yes, as far as my memory serves, I have never been there, but I have the coordinates. A small world in the outback, settled by refugees of the Third Chinese Civil War late in the Hegira. You won't have any trouble getting there? None would be anticipated, said the ship. A simple hawking drive jump, although I recommend that you use the autosurgeon as your cryogenic fugue cubby during the jump. I shook my head again. I'll stay awake, ship, at least after the doc heals my leg. I would recommend against that, Endymion. I frowned. Why? Ania and I stayed awake during the other jumps. Yes, but those were relatively short voyages within the old world web, said the ship. What you now call Pax space. This will be a bit more extensive. How extensive? I said. My naked body felt a sudden chill. Our longest jump, to Renaissance Vector System, had taken 10 days of ship travel time and 5 months of time debt for the Pax fleet awaiting for us. How extensive a trip? I said again. 3 standard months, 18 days, 6 hours, and some minutes, said the ship. That's not too bad a time debt, I said. I last saw Ania just after her 16th birthday. She would gain a few months on me. Her hair might be longer. We had a greater time debt jumping to Renaissance System. That is not time debt, Endymion, said the ship. That is ship time. This time the chill along the length of my body was real. My tongue seemed thick. 3 months ship time.
How much time, Dad? For someone waiting on Tian Shan, said the ship. The jungle world was a speck behind us now as we accelerated toward a translation point. 5 years, 2 months, and 1 day, said the ship. As you are aware, the time debt algorithm is not a linear function of C plus duration, but includes such factors as... Ah, Jesus, I said, raising my wrist to my clammy forehead in the auto-surgeon coffin. God damn. Are you in pain, Endymion? The dolorometer suggests you are not, but your pulse has become erratic. We can increase the level of painkiller. No, I snapped. No, it's all right. 5 years. Damn. Did Ania know this? Had she known that our separation would cover years of her life? Perhaps I should have brought the ship through the downriver Farcaster. No, Ania had said to fetch the ship and fly it to Tian Shan. The Farcaster had brought us to Mare Infinitus last time. Who knows where it would have taken me this time? 5 years, I muttered. Ah, damn. She'll be... Damn, ship. She'll be 21 years old. A grown woman. I'll have missed... I won't see... She won't remember. Are you sure you're not in pain, Endymion? Your vital signs are turbulent. Ignore that, ship. Shall I prepare the autosurgeon for cryogenic fugue? Soon enough, ship. Tell it to put me under while it heals my leg tonight and deals with the fever. I want at least 10 hours sleep. How long until translation point? Only 17 hours. It is well inside this system. Good, I said. Wake me in 10 hours. Have a full breakfast ready. What I used to have when we celebrated Sunday on our voyage out. Very good. Anything else? Yeah, do you have any record holos of Ania on our last trip? I have stored several hours of such records, Endymion. The time you were swimming in the zero-G bubble on the outer balcony, the discussion you had about religion versus rationality, the flying lessons down the central drop shaft when... Good, I said. Cue those up. I'll look through them over breakfast. I'll prepare the autosurgeon for 3 months of cryogenic sleep after your 7-hour interlude tomorrow, said the ship. I took a breath. All right. The surgeon wishes to commence repairing nerve damage and injecting antibiotics now, Endymion. Do you wish to sleep? Yes. With dreams or without, the medication may be tailored for either neurological state. No dreams, I said. No dreams now. There'll be time enough for those later. Very good, Endymion. Sleep well. And that is where we will call it for today. We will resume tomorrow with Part 2 of The Rise of Endymion. So we've had a pretty drastic shift in the status quo. Namely with regards to our good friends in the PAX. With basically Lord Dusamy and the Pope coming clean that, yes, in fact, we've been in communication with the core this entire time. And, oh, by the way, these elements of the core are the ones that make the cruciforms go and do their thing. I do find Isozaki's 180 in perspective on the lifeless people taken from non-Christian worlds kind of interesting. More on that later. Let's see. So we don't know if Federico de Soya is still alive. I guess we'll have to wait and see or something. Well, I know. People who are hearing this for the first time don't. But I know. But I won't tell you. Because I'm not allowed to. That's against the rules. Anyway, that'll do it for today. I'll see you all tomorrow. And we'll do more of this. We're plugging on through. It's happening. Alrighty. With that, I'll leave you all. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, and